May I please have your full and undivided attention? It is time for the Paranormal Rundown. Hello, this is Cedric Danquil Smythe. I'd like to welcome all fans of the paranormal, the unusual, the slightly off-kilter, the frightening, the terrifying, the horrifying, and simply the occasionally entertaining. This is the Paranormal Rundown. There's no place else like it. We now have 2,323 topics from which to choose. In this episode, Father Birdsong is replaced temporarily by Deacon Josh Birdsong. We have an astoundingly knowledgeable guest, Gus Frankenmeir, expert on esoteric philosophy, Manly P. Hall, and all things in the thaumaturgic and quantum realms. Tonight, the gang of nerds proudly tackles the random number generators, Ezekiel's Wheel, Dungeons and Dragons, and much, much more.
Hello, everybody. This is Vic Hermanson with the 15th episode of the Paranormal Rundown. Count 'em 15. I never knew we would actually get to this point. Tonight, we have a guest, and his name is Gus Frankenmeir. Gus is someone who has a great deal of knowledge concerning esoteric philosophy, Manly P. Hall, kind of alternate history, that kind of thing, and I'll let him explain himself better. We also have on the line myself, Vic Hermanson, Dave Griffith from, what's it like in Florida now, Dave? Is it sunny in Florida or is it...
That's nice. 60s, 70s,
60s,
sunny
70s.
today.
Excellent. We have J.J. Johnson, our Second Temple Judaism scholar from Virginia, and taking the place of Father Michael Birdsong is Josh Birdsong, Deacon Josh Birdsong. Because Father Birdsong is simply under the weather and unable to do tonight's episode. The Paranormal Rundown, as you probably already know, is a random selection between 2,323 topics. That's a lot of topics. We will choose 6, and then among us, we will figure out which one we want to talk about first. And if we hate all the topics, then we cheat, and we'll roll the dice again. And if anybody has a topic they just absolutely must talk about, then we allow them simply to say, I'm using executive privilege and I'm choosing that topic. Anything I missed in all of that?
I think that about covers it.
About covers it. Okay.
Welcome to the show, Gus.
Thank you.
All right, let's go here. I gotta go back to Excel. Hitting the F9 key, and I'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Wait, before we start, can we talk about random number generators?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. That's
Breaking
actually
the rules right off the bat. I like you, Gus.
I like it, Gus.
Good start.
That's a good thing to talk about.
Hello all Paranormal Rundown fans. This is Avalon Lee and Dackworth Smythe. Huzzah, 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 and an extra huzzah just for good measure. Less than 3 minutes into the show, Popper and Gus, the stranger from the conceptual wilderness, has seized control of the gang of nerds. He must have a truly special form of paranormal dork talk mojo.
Do you think that thoughts can influence random number generators?
You're talking about the Princeton eggs.
Well, maybe.
Yes. Do I believe that thoughts can... Yes, I do, actually.
What about random number generators and quantum computers?
Those are the ones I'm thinking of. What is a Princeton egg?
Well, Gus, do you know, can you talk about the Princeton eggs well?
Well, I know that there's a program that Google and a couple other companies are running that it uses random number generators and quantum computers, and they actually had to shield them from human thought.
Correct.
Which is pretty odd. It's odd behavior for a computer in general, but specifically, I guess the quantum computer has that issue.
Well, I had a conversation probably with one of these guys in the last 2 weeks about poltergeists, ghosts, being able to impact quantum processors in quantum computers.
You and I were talking about
that. I mean, so what you've got with the quantum computers, you've got a situation where the processor itself is contained in this highly, highly shielded room. It's shielded from everything. It's shielded from electromagnetism. Gordy Rose, the guy who runs D-Wave, says that the space where the actual processor is in a quantum computer, which really looks about like the processor in my laptop, is the coldest place in the universe.
I believe that.
Well, it has to be.
Yeah, it has to be. It's the coldest place in the universe. And it's
So
getting...
cold.
Go ahead.
Does that mean that we can't think when there's cold? When it's too cold out?
Well, okay, but wait. There's a lot to dig into here.
Can we back up just for a little bit and talk about random number generators just in general first?
We sure can, yes.
So as a technologist and architect and developer for the past 25 plus years, I know my fair share about RNGs. RNGs, at least with dealing with typical programming languages or libraries, because almost everything is done through libraries because you never really want to reinvent the wheel. Random number generators are never truly random.
Nope.
There is always a pattern because there's always a method to be able to pick one of these numbers.
And it's important. Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, it's important in the simulation world, at least, that it not be truly random. Okay, you've got to be able to make one change in that model and make sure that it's going to go through the same exact random number stream that it went through before.
Exactly.
And
you
it
have to be able to track back exactly the steps that were taken.
Correct.
Which is absolutely one of the missing pieces of ingredients when it comes to LLMs or large language models with generative AI. But that's an entirely different topic. And you can attempt to seed random information, more and more random information to make it more random in general, but you're never going to truly get random. You can just try to sow as much chaos as humanly possible to get a more randomized number. However, when it comes to quantum computing, you're dealing with qubits. And a particle you can only measure two distinct phases of a particle: the spin and its charge. No, its movement or its spin. Anyway,
You can measure its velocity or you can measure its location.
Right, and you can never pick. You can never know both. And that's.
But can't you bias both, like with electromagnetism?
Can't you what
Can you
now?
repeat that question? Sorry.
Can't you bias both of those things with electromagnetism?
Well, you can pinpoint one of those two variables, but you can never know both due to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Hey, Gus, can I just jump in here 1 second? Since you seem to be, as I knew you would, just grooving right on in. We had a fantastic guest one time whose name was Sylvia Schultz. And we were kind of explaining to her what we were doing, and she says, "Oh, paranormal dork talk. Yeah, I can do that all day long."
And this is perfect paranormal dork talk.
We're on the precipice of physics, though, right now, I think.
Well, that's okay. That's well within paranormal dork talk.
We're firmly in the realm of physics right now.
Yeah, this is just, but this is just fine.
But what you said, Gus, was you could bias the spin or the direction, but that's still not measuring it, though, right? You could potentially influence, is what you're saying, but you can't guarantee it, right?
But isn't measurement influence in this case on the quantum level?
Yes.
Because
on the quantum level, if you are, so normally, like it used to be like back when I was in school, if you ever saw a depiction of an atom, then it would have very, distinct orbits for its electrons, etc. However, in very modern pictures, those are depicted as clouds because we know the general shape of where these things could be at. But until you physically measure it, they're everywhere at once. It's the spooky distance at an action.
Right, a cloud of probability.
It's outside of time, right? And that's the difference, right?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. I'm not sure quite what you mean by that.
It's not subject to time. Like it can be in multiple positions at the same time.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yes, it can be.
Or space. Yeah.
But it's not until you physically measure it will it become locked in one locale.
Which is why they have to shield everything.
Exactly. And the problem with qubits is suddenly you're dealing with a lot more variables than just, a binary 1 or 0. You have, several distinct different states. And so you're able to encode more information. However, because you can't truly predict every variable that's going on, it's impossible, at least according to physics as we understand it. Then there are going to be random patterns that into any computation. And you have to be able to factor any of those outliers out. And by making things as cold as humanly possible, as close to absolute zero as we can get, then that helps to eliminate some of that variance. And in fact, we've been, at least according to these companies that create these quantum computers, they have been able to add even more qubits into the equation than was predicted upon a linear timescale.
Well, can I talk about that a second?
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of meeting Gordy Rose one time, who is he's the founder of D-Wave. And
you met him? That's pretty cool. It
was very cool. And I got to talk to him for 15, 20 minutes. D-Wave is a company that makes what they call an adiabatic quantum annealer.
Predictive models?
What's that?
Predictive models, right?
Like the traveling salesman kind of optimization kind of problems. And
okay.
It doesn't do that computer doesn't do everything that just even my laptop can do in terms of being a gated computer. But they've been doing this now for, how long has D-Wave been around, Dave? Must easily 25 years now or so.
Been a bit, but I don't.
Yeah, it's been a bit. So since they got on the scene first, they've got this massive patent bank of all this different quantum technology. So if Google or Amazon, if they want to do something in the quantum realm, they got to pay D-Wave, at least for a while longer. But what he was saying was, look, if you have one gated computer that's a universal computer, that's great. But I can take 4 quantum annealers and run them together in such a way that they're more or less doing the same thing as a gated computer does. And I'm not limited to 4 or 6 or 8 qubits like these classical representations of a quantum computer are. I have 64,000 qubits.
Vic Hermanson, in your enthusiasm, you have slightly overstated the actual specifications of the most powerful current D-Wave computer. It is called the Advantage, and has 5,000 active qubits, with 15 couplers per qubit. Still, despite its tremendous power with certain types of problems, it should not be considered a general-purpose computer.
Now, they're not 64,000 general-purpose qubits, but that's still a very, very powerful kind of thing to have going on. I've been wondering what the companies who buy these computers are doing with them. Lockheed buys. Lockheed is always one of the first companies to buy these things. Google has a full quantum computer lab now. I wonder what the work being done on those computers is.
Predictive
We
models.
probably don't want to know.
I mean, from what I hear, it's predictive models.
Predictive modeling in terms of like,
they were
stock
using
markets.
Stock markets is where I think the D-Wave stuff was originally used. And I think Google uses it, and a couple other companies, but that's what I've heard.
Well, I'm pretty sure you're right. I am pretty sure you're right. I
thought they took emotive language and converted it to code, where the code would basically if a large group of people in a certain area used the same emotive words, that would be put into the database as a predictor of sorts. So it could predict human behavior.
Correct. Well, that gets us back to the eggs. Okay, the Princeton eggs. And I don't know how many Princeton eggs there are now.
Greetings, everyone. This is Cedric Dankworth Smythe. There are currently 70 Princeton eggs in service. They are part of what is generally known as the Global Consciousness Project. I now return you to the unprotected gang of nerds.
But the last I checked, there were several hundred spread out through the world.
Vic Hermanson has been on a genuine exaggeration roll tonight. We'll have to have a discussion about that.
Okay, an egg is just a small random number generator. And the truth is, I don't know if it's just a pseudo-random number generator like all other random number generators, or if it's something like an electronic circuit that's taking random data from the noise between two transistors or two resistors, or it's keying on something like atomic decay, because using those methods you actually can get genuine randomness. Like I said,
atomic decay, would that be random though? Really?
Well, once again, I mean, you're talking, if there's any pattern, it's going to play out over a couple of billion years. And so I don't know about you, Gus, but I don't think I'm going to be around in a couple of billion years.
Let's hope not. I think we want to see ourselves in the mirror in a couple of billion years.
That's the thing I tell people. They talk about, what about eternity? What about being here in a couple of billion years? Look, I've barely got next Thursday under control.
Right.
And you're doing better than I am.
I've barely got next Thursday under control. I don't think I'm going to be able to handle a billion years from now. But anyway, what the eggs do is they're constantly creating random numbers, billions of times a second. And of course, what you're going to get over time is a jagged line.
A chicken?
No, a what? A what?
A chicken.
Yeah.
You said egg.
Egg. Yeah, you get a chicken.
Good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
But you're going to get this jagged line.
Hello, this is Cedric Dankworth Smythe. Gus has inspired me to explore my cybernetic humor side. Why did the quantum chicken cross the road? Well, of course, to get to the other side and to stay on the same side at the same time. You didn't know I could be so funny, did you?
Where the number of where the number of ones go up, or the number of zeros go up. Anyway, this is going to be this very jagged line. And over time, it's going to revert to a mean, revert to whatever mean it's using. What they have found, and this is not speculation, I can find the articles and they're peer reviewed, I can send them to you. Prior to some major world event, the eggs go nuts. And you'll get these big shifts in either positive numbers, negative numbers, whatever they're doing. And that's an indication that something is getting ready to happen somewhere. The biggest shift ever measured was the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks, where these things just went totally nuts. Now, the problem is, it seems like it'll tell you that something's going to happen, but you have no data at all as to what it might be. It's kind of like consciousness and awareness isn't limited to linear forward time.
So it projects backwards, basically.
Projects backwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes sense. Theoretically.
And I well,
I'm glad it makes sense to you.
Well, yeah, but they publish every month meaningful statistical anomalies in the egg system, and then they try to tie it to whatever it might be. And I'm not sure they even always get it right, but some things are so big it's just kind of clear, like the Fukushima meltdown.
Still leaking, by the way.
Still leaking, by the way. The eggs start to show something is going to happen prior to people understanding what happened. Look, I think that's amazing. It's just one of those questions of, that means there's a lot to the universe that I don't understand. And guess what? Nobody else does either.
I've heard that they tried to narrow down like emotive states of people, like to kind of diagnose like which emotive state brings, like it would predict an event happening, and compassion is the emotive state that they've identified, which is kind of interesting.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So like when people use words to describe what's happening and they share it online, they're obviously going to pick particular words that kind of communicate their emotive state. But words that depict compassion are the ones that kind of are a precursor to like terrible things happening.
But compassionate words in the online world are relatively rare.
Right. And it's usually reserved for times when something terrible happens.
Okay, and so people start using more okay, I've got you now. Okay, so people start using more compassionate words prior to the 1,000-pound bomb going off in the mosque in Washington or whatever.
Oh, well, maybe like after it goes off, and like the backwards projection.
Backwards projection. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So that's essentially the way I understood it. I read a couple articles on it too. I mean, on the quantum level, because time doesn't exist, it kind of makes sense that you could project backwards and maybe give yourself ideas in the past. I mean,
yeah,
you're obviously quantum entangled with yourself at different points in time and space, right?
I got a question I'd like to throw out to the group, and with the thought that maybe somebody knows. You will hear the term quantum entanglement quite a bit. It's a pretty common term. Again, of course, what that means is you got two particles. One particle is in your front yard, one particle is on Mars, and you change the state of the particle in your front yard, and the particle on Mars instantaneously changes in order to reflect that state change.
Right. That's what JJ mentioned earlier. Spooky action at a distance.
Yep. How do those two particles become entangled in the first place?
Wait, do you mind if I divert this conversation for a second?
The first rule of Paranormal Rundown is there are no rules of Paranormal Rundown.
All right. Well, I didn't want to completely derail your thought, but I mean, I was thinking this out, right? There's a way to time travel because of the spooky action. What you could potentially do is quantum entangle two particles together, send them through a beam of light, right? At the speed of light, receive them back in the past. And you could potentially communicate with yourself in the past by doing that. Think about that. Like you could send yourself messages in the past by sending from the past to the future, but it can only be at the time that you created the machine that would send the particle to the future. You could spin the particle in the past, communicate with yourself in the future, and tell yourself, potentially, different things. I mean, you could say like, you could tell yourself all kinds of things, and then the future you could communicate with you in the past by spinning the same particle.
Well, I would like that. I mean, I'd like for my 16-year-old self to know 3 words. You know, Dell, Apple, Amazon.
Did they have? Was there a quantum computer in the past that you could communicate with yourself with?
No, but I'm going for the deluxe model.
Okay. Theoretically, this is possible.
No, I'd be happy with just those 3 words. Just give me those 3 words. Well, so
theoretically, it's possible. Technology is not there. Maybe it is. Maybe it's happening right now.
Well, that may be what Google and Northrop Grumman and Lockheed, and I'm pretty sure Amazon's got a quantum computer lab somewhere, don't they, JJ? I mean,
we do indeed.
That's fun.
We have there is you can actually rent time on our quantum stuff that's in the cloud.
You can rent time to use it.
Yeah.
Just like you used to rent time on mainframes.
You can rent for.
Is it time in the future or the past?
only the present.
All right, only the present. Okay.
Well, so what sort of things are people, or do they tell you, are companies renting time to do?
Oh no, we are not privileged to that information unless you are working directly on that particular client engagement, and even then
you've got a serious NDC going on.
Exactly.
Or
I wouldn't
NDA.
be able to say a word. But I mean, in general, the thing is about quantum computers, there are very definitive use cases for when a quantum computer is going to be able to provide a faster, more reliable answer than a traditional computer system can. However, it is not a well-defined problem set. In fact, people are still searching for what is the best reason to use a quantum computer. There are definitely algorithms out there which needs that extra set of capabilities, but this is something that is still being actively researched.
I mean, it takes a lot of resources to operate one, right? Like,
it does.
Expensive. Well, I'll hold out till I can afford one.
I think probably just the infrastructure for one is bigger than your house. But
currently.
I just like how we went to random number generator to quantum physics and time travel.
Oh, hey, so okay, let's try something. Why don't you try your random number generator, and we'll all think about melon heads. See if we can influence it.
Give me a thumbs up. I've brought several guests to the rundown. For the most part, they've been crackerjack. Is Gus crackerjack or not?
He's all right.
Very definite natural member of the dork crew.
No, absolutely. Great tangent right off the bat.
Right.
Interesting
bam.
topic. I love it.
Yeah, just like rookie of the year. Okay, let me pull up. I'm going to share this one though. I want to make sure that nobody thinks I'm trying to lie.
And while you're doing that, so the conversation Vic and I had on this the other day was about, I bet you that the tech moguls that run these companies that deal with the quantum computers have to deal with things like sites with paranormal activity. You know, the conversation was along the lines of, do you think when they're picking where they're going to put their big super quantum computer infrastructure, make sure it's not haunted? Because the last thing we need is to have all of this electromagnetic interference, cold spots, whatever, energy waves that happen, messing up with our computers.
So they won't be on Skinwalker Ranch,
right?
Exactly.
You wouldn't put your quantum computer on Skinwalker Ranch, or in the
Stanley Hotel,
the Stanley Hotel,
right,
or the house in Poltergeist or any of these places.
Which brings up the question, is the shielding that they do enough, or is it, let's say that you were at Homestead 2 or whatever it is at Skinwalker Ranch, and that's where you chose to build your quantum computer plant, right? And now, if you clear away the house, that doesn't necessarily mean the activity is gone, because we've seen activity in places where houses have been demolished.
Sure.
Right? If you dig down 3 stories, well, 3 stories below that house where it was, is that area clear enough? Right? If you took and dug down 3 stories and built 3 stories above it, and you built this big room and you shielded the whole thing.
Put a foot of copper around it.
Yeah, exactly. Would that be enough? Or is the physical coordinates of where that Homestead 2 was what is physically haunted? Right? Is there still going to be activity in there?
It is an interesting thought, though. How would you shield it properly from that interference?
Well, and
would it be enough?
If the spot that is haunted is inside of that shielding, even if you've cleared everything out, you've dug out all the land, you've removed all the house, all the infrastructure, and you have nothing but empty space there. Well, is the paranormal activity tied to the molecules of the land? Or is it tied to that physical location in space and time?
Well, what about this thought? Like, so doesn't CERN have a quantum computer?
I'm sure they do.
I would imagine.
Okay. I heard that they built the whole CERN complex on an old site that was like a temple to Apollo. And
it was probably
local legend that it was local legend that it was a gate to the underworld. So maybe like intentionally you can cross dimensions. Maybe if you were to build a quantum computer.
Well, have you ever seen the ceremony, the public party they did when they opened CERN?
Oh yeah, that was creepy, wasn't it?
It was pretty damn creepy.
It was a little creepy.
To go look
I don't think I've seen that.
Well, it's kind of like watching a druid ritual or something.
Okay.
It's pretty damn creepy. But okay, first I got one more thing I want to say is well, there needs to be then a service of people who find places in the world that are the most boring, where there's not any electromagnetic interference, where there's nothing that's going to happen to your
no abnormalities, no blips.
Right, just the most boring places you can find.
Dead zones.
Dead zones. So when various space agencies send something to the moon or they send something to Mars, they go to boring places because they're trying to land somewhere where it's flat, where there aren't any gravitational anomalies, where they can put a craft down there and probably have it survive. And what that means is that everything around there is about the same.
Right.
Things aren't very interesting.
So like Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah,
I was about to say
Kansas City, Missouri.
It's like I-20 here in Georgia. It's just boring the whole way.
Okay, what we're talking about here is a directed intention experiment.
Okay.
A somewhat small scale.
Melonhead. The Melonhead experiment.
Melonhead thing.
So this is like the stuff that I've mentioned before. Is we've touched on a couple of these things before, but Rupert Sheldrake has directed attention experiments on his website. Go out there, sheldrake.org. How did
he go about doing them? Maybe we should follow the scientific principle on
it. In this case, he has these experiments where you choose a partner and you log in to 2 different computers and you do a joint attention test. And it shows a series of I can't remember, 3 or 4 images. And one of you is the chooser, right? You're focusing on which image you want to choose, and the other is the guesser. And they have to guess which image it is the chooser is choosing. And apparently they've had some really interesting results with that.
Okay.
In fact, when we had the guys from The Wandering Road on, we had Chris and Dean, I told them it would be perfect for the two of them before one of their shows to log onto that site and play with that.
So in this case, would Victor be the would Vic be the chooser?
I guess so, since I've got anybody who had the program in
Okay.
front of them could be the chooser.
Okay. All right.
I guess really what would be best would be if I sent you the list, you gave it to your daughter or your wife, you had them run it, and we're all concentrating to get melon heads.
Well, they're asleep, so
They're asleep, yeah. I kind of figured that, but so do you guys know what the talking about quantum stuff? Do you know what the Penrose Hammer-Off model is?
that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
This is on Final Jeopardy last night. The Penrose Hammer-Off model, Roger Penrose wrote this paper a long time ago now, mid-'80s or so, talking about, because in brain cells there are microtubules, little cylindrical protein lattices. And his conjecture is that quantum processes go on inside of those microtubules. And that is how human consciousness arises. Through the quantum activity of the brain.
Okay.
That's as far as I can take that.
So it's just from the brain. Consciousness is just a brain activity.
According to Roger According to
So it's
Roger
not-
Penrose.
So it's inside the biological model somewhere. Like there's basically your consciousness is like tied to your physical state.
Correct. That's the Roger Penrose approach.
Then there's also like the view that your consciousness holds your physical state together in
Yes.
the first place. What's the name for that? Because I don't really know the name for that one.
Consciousness holds your physical state together.
I don't know the
Meaning
name for that.
that
I
if
think-
you
I
lost
think, like,
consciousness, you'd fall apart.
Pretty much. I think Plotinus was the first one to kind of put the hammer to the nail on that one.
Great. Something else I've got to worry about. Consciousness.
Right. Right.
Next thing you know, I'm just a pile of molecules laying on the floor.
Okay, Plotinus was a Greek Platonist philosopher born and raised in Rome and Egypt. Let's see. Let's put Plotinus consciousness in here.
You might type in like Plotinus the One, or like they call him like Plotinus the Beautiful, because he basically had a theory that if a whole didn't serve a purpose, then it wasn't a whole, I guess.
All right. It's here, but I'm going to tell you right away, this is too big a rabbit hole to go down and do it justice. Okay, we can do many rabbit holes, but this one would take us the rest of the rundown. So why don't I add it to the rundown and put together a little bit of information about it, and then at some future show we'll talk about Plotinus. Because there's a lot to talk about here, but it's too big a rabbit hole. Okay, here is the suggestion from Gus. He wants us to all concentrate heavily on melon heads. And I'm going to hit the F9 key for a while. And whenever Gus, as the honored guest, tells me to, I will let go.
No.
What's
No.
that?
No.
I haven't started pressing it yet. Ain't no gas in it. I haven't started pressing.
All right.
Why that motor running? Ain't got no gas in it. Okay, I am starting to press right now. Waiting for the sign from Gus. Concentrating on melon heads.
I'll give it a go.
Okay.
We
Infernal
didn't get melon heads.
Bender mystery, remote studying paranormal aspects.
Debunked. All right, cross that one.
Come on. That's an N of 1.
No.
I think we need. I think we need to give it an N of at least 3. I mean, we got Infernal Name Diabolus, Ability Faith Healing, the Bender Mystery, Remote Staring, Paranormal Aspects of Sex, and are there any actual paranormal experts?
Okay, but now this is let's do 3 times, right? And the third time we'll pick from that list as our next topic. But let's just notice that remote staring is a related topic to what we're trying to do.
So you have to actually watch the spreadsheet.
Right? You're talking about influencing something through consciousness, remote staring, which I assume is something really related to like remote viewing.
Well, no, what that means is
in the same realm.
If you're in a room and there's
This
somebody
is flawed because we don't have a quantum computer.
Right, we don't have a quantum computer. They're not on sale this week.
Should we rent space?
Yeah, the rundown doesn't have that kind of a budget.
My understanding is that for a while there, Randonautica actually was renting quantum computer space.
You know, I haven't used that app in a long time, but I have used that app.
All right, let's try.
That should be a topic.
It is. It's definitely in the rundown. Guarantee you.
All right, so let's do it again and see if we come up with another topic that's sort of quantum influence.
So you're counting remote staring as kind of a hit.
Yeah, it's kind of a hit. It's an interesting.
All right, here we
similarity.
Go. Okay, starting the random selection process. Now you got to give me a few seconds so I can get my mind away from the spreadsheet and onto melon heads. Okay, here we go. Pressing.
Now.
X-ray eyes, X-ray vision, New England faceless people, serious mystery. Sure, go ahead and lick that frog. Ezekiel's wheel. Why would Satan buy souls when they are so freely offered? I'm going to say that's a
complete miss. What's Ezekiel's wheel?
Oh God,
the Bible.
That topic.
The biblical topic. Okay.
From the
okay.
You hate that topic?
Or the Bible.
Jay, did you say you hate that topic or you love that topic?
I love that topic.
Okay, we can put that on there. Okay, last time here. 9. Okay, got my mind on that forest with those big old melon head kids with big fangs and claws.
No.
Chinese Bosnian pyramids, Patagonian giants, superconsciousness. Do we need a Butlerian jihad? Amish hex signs and Project Blue Book. Okay, I'm going to say that our experiment with an N of 3 was a bust.
Debunked.
But you did get super consciousness.
I did get super consciousness. I absolutely did get super consciousness.
So 2 consciousness-related topics.
2 consciousness-related
out
topics.
Out of 3 runs. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's as
interesting.
I think it's as good as any.
That's a pattern. That's a
pattern.
Little bit of a pattern.
So,
why don't you hit it one more time, though?
Okay.
I don't like these topics. Let's take a different topic.
All right, here we go. Got to get my mind in the forest with those melon. Look, you got to really see this. I don't have visual.
No. Try this time. You don't think of anything.
Don't think of anything. Make my mind blank.
And we will focus on the melon head kid.
Like,
oh yeah, that's good.
Like don't think of purple polar bears kind of thing. Okay.
Think of your happiest memory. How about that?
And the rest of us will think melon head.
Okay, yeah. I got it. Here we go.
Okay. Now.
Let's see. Aggressive comedy response to any paranormal evidence, fantasy proneness, Barbados Vaults, Order of the Golden Dawn, Split Brain Syndrome, King Arthur, and Arthurian Legends. No way.
No. Okay. Well, debunked.
Debunked. All right. Listen, that was as good an opening as we've ever had, I would say.
That was the best topic before the topic that we've ever had.
That was that was a topic before the topic. It got us through, close to 45 minutes of rundown. Okay, let me go back to the topics that we chose a moment ago, since I made a screenshot of those.
Okay.
The first topics chosen in the Gus Frankenmeir era of the Paranormal Rundown were H. Holmes and the Chicago Murder House. Number 2, nature of evil. Is it an absolute? Number 3, what does the devil look like? Number 4, a pretty broad topic, visions. Number 5, Lovelock Cave. And number 6, seemingly absurd statements, such as, we do not exist, time is not real, etc.
And I get to pick? Is that how this works?
If you like any of those, or if you hate all those, we can spin again.
Was there a 6th, or was there just 5?
There were 6. H. Holmes, Nature of Evil. What does the devil look like? Visions, Lovelock Cave, absurd statements.
Let's do absurd statements for 11.
I like the absurd.
11 in there.
I like the absurd statements question, because you'll hear this sort of thing where physics will say things like, well, you really aren't conscious. You don't have any consciousness. Or things like, humans have no free will. And yes, I'm trying to sound specifically like a douchebag, but
keep working on that voice, Vic, but I think you're getting there.
Is that what big science tells us?
This is what yes, big science wants us to believe that our minds have no impact into the existence of the world and that we are merely mechanical beings. You hear this kind of stuff all the time. So when I hear the terms of time is not real, well, believe me, my time clock and my deadline calendar tells me that time is real. The fact that if I don't feed a child or a dog or myself, over 40 days, time is real.
My wife insists that my forgetting stuff in time is very, very real.
Yes, I know. Well, here's the other thing. I've got a mostly eidetic memory. And it's not perfect. I'm not a Tesla. But nothing feels like it happened a long time ago. Everything that I can remember is so vivid and fresh and clear in my mind that it might as well have happened yesterday or last week.
And that sounds really great.
No.
For good things.
For good things.
It sounds absolutely horrible for bad things.
Absolutely horrible. So who's got any brilliance on these kinds of statements?
I think Kronos, there's a statue of Kronos in Greece, and I forget exactly where, but on the base of the statue, it says there are 2 kinds of time. And that's kind of like an interesting statement. Kind of makes you think about like the theoretical concept of time and like, what is it really like? And we have a very linear view.
Hello. This is Avalon Lee and Dankworth Smythe. In many ways, and for many concepts, the ancient Greeks were more accurate in their distinctions than is modern man. For instance, they recognized 8 distinct types of love. To the Greeks, the word chronos meant time as it can be measured by a clock. Seconds, minutes, hours, years, even millennia. It refers to the ephemeral and irretrievable nature of time. Once that instantaneous segment of linear time has passed, it is gone forever. Chronos is a quantitative concept. Kairos, on the other hand, is qualitative. It measures moments, not seconds. Further, it refers to the right moment, the opportune moment, the perfect moment. Poetically, it has been described as, the world takes a breath, and in the pause before it exhales, the fates of humans, kings, and even nations, can be changed.
On time, like there's a start and a finish. But really, like, what is it? It's just a way for our brains to interpret moving in space.
Correct.
Right? And that's essentially a sense. It's not a linear thing that starts and stops, and there's no real definite point on the timeline besides your memory. Your memory is the only thing that records a snapshot of how it was for you at that exact moment.
Well, I mean, if you look at it in a certain way, all that exists is contained within the current Planck time length. That's it.
Explain that.
Okay, well, the Planck measurements are the point where the universe breaks down mathematically. Okay, there's a minimum distance that can be measured, and that can be discussed mathematically. There's a minimum amount of time that can be discussed mathematically, and that's the Planck length and the Planck time. So our lives, if you look at it that way, are just a continuing set of stacked up dominoes, each domino falling over in one Planck unit of time, like a movie.
But can you explain it though without resorting to science?
Well, let's see here. Well, can I? All right, maybe I can.
Okay.
I mean, you're pretty good at this stuff too, Gus. Well, all right. I mean, I kind of like the domino idea. When I was a child, I actually had in my mind the belief that I died every tiny little interval of time. I stopped existing every tiny little interval of time. And immediately I was replaced by another me for the next tiny little interval of time. And I was going through this stuff when I was 8.
That's like an extreme version of the Langoliers.
Well, tell us about that. I mean,
now, Langoliers was a very good Stephen King novel. Well, I'm not sure if it was a novel or a short story, but I do remember reading it while I was on a plane flying, and considering the fact that I cannot go to sleep on a flight, doesn't matter how long it is, I was rightfully petrified by the time that I landed on the ground. Because in the story, everyone gets on a plane, the plane passes through a rift in space, and anyone who was not asleep is essentially catapulted into a frozen moment of time, which is now in the past. And in the story, and spoiler alerts for anyone who wants to read it and has not yet, or seen the wonderful ABC family movie that depicted it. I'm a sucker for the ABC movies of the Stephen King's books. And I know I'm the only one, but
no. I like those. I remember. I think I saw the movie, or at least parts of it. Because what I'm remembering is everybody was saying things like, why is the sound so muffled?
Oh, yeah. And like food suddenly did not taste right. Anything drinkable did not taste it stale. And then they began to see these creatures, and at least in the movie, they were depicted as having it was almost like a beholder, but instead of eye stalks, it only had 3 flaps that closed in the front. And each one of those flaps was surrounded with serrated teeth that rotated extremely fast. And their job was to constantly annihilate time, these past times, in order to make way for future times.
What's a beholder?
Oh, Beholder is a D&D monster. They are floating circular balls with eye stalks on the end and one giant eye in the middle with a row full of serrated teeth. And each one of the eye stalks will cast a different form of magic. And the central eye casts out a anti-magic field. Extremely deadly. They are unnatural. And in fact, if you cause a beholder to dream, then that is how they reproduce. Another beholder or a death tyrant or one of the other numerous offshoots of that lineage can then spring forth into reality.
Well, Vic, before we go on to another topic, I just wanted to ask with the things, with this topic of comments or of statements, was there something specific you were trying to get at with it when you put it down? There's a lot of times you have an underlying idea of why. Were you just looking for
you mean
random things?
The statement of the topic of these ridiculous, seemingly absurd statements?
Yeah, was there some correlation you were looking at across all those statements that are made?
Well, there are a lot more than just those three.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Well, that's my point. Is there a commonality that you're thinking?
I mean, look, if there's one thing that I'm proud of about myself, is that I piss off everybody. I piss off theists. I piss off atheists. I piss off scientists. I piss off flat earthers. Everybody who talks to me finds something to be pissed off about. In my mind, that means I'm doing something right. I mean, I'm asking questions that people find universally uncomfortable. And so to me, like, the douchebag voice that I use, yes, the common man simply can't understand these things, drives me freaking nuts. Because I believe the common man is generally pretty damn smart, pretty damn capable of understanding reality, pretty damn capable of getting information out of systems that the elite intelligentsia generally considers them to be unqualified to do. And I just hate these kind of statements. And when you read when you say, okay, look, so the man has no free will. I spent an entire Sunday a few weeks ago going through the University of Northern Iowa library, trying to find peer-reviewed articles about human free will. And look, I got to tell you, there's just not a lot of meat there. There's not
like philosophical though. Like, I mean, more than scientific, right?
Yeah, it's much more philosophical than scientific. I mean, when you go into the scientific realm that has to do with will, it seems like we were talking about before about human thoughts impacting quantum computers. That's a situation where human will is changing the physical world. I mean, just read about the double slit experiment, of, as soon as there's observation, you've got wave patterns. So I just have not found anybody. Look, the Dork Crew is about the only place in the world I can talk about these things.
So if I was to sum that up, I would say you view these statements as condescending ways of ending an argument before getting into the meat of it.
Well, at least sometimes, yeah. And
right?
I use
it's somebody making a statement that is provocative but not arguable.
I use the word absurd, seemingly absurd. Okay, now I know in building large-scale simulations, not all systems behave in an intuitive manner. Not all systems do what you expect them to do. Okay, and you'll have sometimes managers of these systems saying, no, it's not going to do that. Well, you walk them through the model and you show what the model is showing. And the question is this actually creating a meaningful analog of reality?
Right, is it reflective of reality?
Is it reflective of reality? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I mean, I've made some boners. I've made some errors in modeling. Anybody who's done any big-time modeling has. But I don't have a problem with statements that talk about things that are difficult to understand. I have a problem when these absurd statements are made, seemingly absurd statements are made, and there's not an equally or an extremely high level of support for that statement.
Well, that's kind of like
go ahead, Josh.
It's kind of like I've heard some people say, "We're just all in the simulation. We're all in the Matrix."
Yeah, I don't think we're in a simulation. And I don't care what Elon says. I don't think we're in a simulation.
Well, I mean, of sorts, right? Like, just if you define like what reality really is, what is it?
Oh, I like it. Keep going with that, Gus. Because that's exactly the way I think.
Yeah, you and Dave could just probably carry on the rest of the show.
Like I've had conversations with theists that where they're trying to tell me that God isn't an alien, and by definition, God is an alien. God isn't from the world. Like if you read like what most religions teach, so like think about like principles like that. Like what do these words that we're saying actually mean, and like what's the archetype behind the word? Like the word was invented for a reason, right?
Which word was that?
Any word. Like, so we use these words to describe things, right? And we use calculations, like we use our math to describe things that actually happen. But really, what are they? It's our five senses trying to make sense of what we see and hear and taste and smell every day. But like, that's essentially like you're in a video game and you can't possibly know and see everything that exists in the universe at the same time.
You
right?
cannot. Nope.
And so I guess like my thought is like, why bother, and why not just say you're in a simulation? What's the point?
Well, I mean,
are you smarter than the simulation?
A simulation implies a simulator.
I mean, wouldn't your mind be the simulator at that point? Like,
well, I ask you this. If you have someone who creates a simulation, let's say a gaming world, they create the characters, they create the rules on how things operate in that world, they create the environments, the artwork, everything. It's all, rule-based. It's chunks of code, whatever. How is that different than God creating the universe?
In my mind, it's not. I think
from my view, we're God's simulation. Now, that's not where Elon's going, right? What Elon's saying is we have at some point, we'll have the capability of making massive simulations, that everything down to the finest atomic level detail. And if we can run those kind of simulations, we will. We'll run them for a bunch of different reasons. And if we do, the chances of us being the real one versus the simulated one is pretty small, because there will be more simulations than there are real people. That's I think the general idea of where he comes from. But that implies a simulator other than God. It's some person in the future or past who is using this technology. But it's no different than what I think God does.
I mean, by definition, a simulation, right?
Well, we're a creation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
we live in a universe that has rules. It has ways that things function and work. It has some sort of media that it is built out of. I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
What if the rules are like given? Like, what if we give the rules permission? Like
permission to do what?
By perceiving them. Like
so the
rules,
perception of the perception of the rule brings about the reality of the rule.
Right.
Not sure.
And what if the rules can change based on the way you think?
Well, that's a cool thought.
I mean, on the quantum level, all the rules change, right? We talk about quantum computing. That's mind blowing, right? You're not gonna be able to draw a picture of that, right?
I can't.
Yeah. And we've talked about that a little bit in the past, the idea that at the quantum level, it seems like we are able to influence very small things. But that's a lot different than creating complex things, right? The idea, and this is, I think we were talking about it in relation to tulpas.
Yeah, you said we'd have pink narwhals swimming down the street.
Right. If that's what everybody's thinking about, then you would think that that's what would happen. So if the universe does have a creative mode in reality that allows us it has to be in only very specific circumstances. You got to have a very specific set of rules that you have to hit.
Well, I mean, if you take like a biocentrist point of view on it, like the whole thing's a simulation, and everybody has a different experience, right? Like you could have 10 people in a room, something could happen, and it could be described 10 different ways based on the emotions and based on like the viewpoint of the person that experienced it. Like that happens all the time.
Well, my greatest disappointment on Trailer Trash Terrors has been that I got what I thought was an acceptance from Frank Tipler to be on the show, which would have been for me a real win. You know. Apparently Frank is getting kind of sick. Have you guys read any of the Frank Tipler stuff?
I can't say I have.
Okay, Frank Tipler wrote the book called The Omega Point, and the premise of the book is that as time progresses, computing capability will become so massive that it will be trivial for a computer to completely recreate all possible events in the past, including JJ, which is a relatively unlikely event if you just think about it.
That's not the crackpot professor from Louisiana.
Yes, he is.
I read that book when I was in college. I was so incensed, I threw it across the room.
Oh, okay. Well, wait. This is all right. This is good. Okay. I mean, the book I threw across the room. All right. This is a good point. JJ threw the Omega Point across the room. I threw the Number of the Beast across the room. Gus, you thrown any books across the room? Gus, aliens got Gus. Dave, you thrown any books? You thrown any books across the room?
Oh, I'm trying to think. There's been very few books that have made me so mad that although, you know what? The book that I threw down and didn't pick back up again until the series was made by HBO was the Game of Thrones.
Was the Game of Thrones? Okay.
Yep.
What made you?
I got so mad when they killed Ned Stark.
Oh, yeah.
Because I related to that character so much.
Well, you realize you just sent spoilers out to the universe there.
Yeah, if they haven't heard that Stark died in Game of Thrones by now, they're never going to hear it.
I've never seen a moment of Game of Thrones.
Oh, I read the books years before it was ever made and loved them until the last two that came out were split, and like the characters that I absolutely abhorred were all in one book. The ones that I liked were all in another book. And I'm like, no, this is crap. I cannot do it. And I stopped from that point on.
All right, Deacon Josh, is there something you've thrown across the room?
No, I've never thrown any books across the room.
Okay.
I've thrown 3.
Oh, wow. JJ's on the far end of the bell
He's a
curve
prolific book thrower.
Apparently so, and I don't think I'm full of rage.
The connoisseur.
The first one was the Omega Point. Okay, what were number 2 and 3?
The second one was The Demonologist. And the third was Evil Archaeology.
Yeah, you talked about 2 of those books on your podcast.
Yes, I did. I did an entire episode on how horrible Evil Archaeology happened to be. So I'm quite proud of that episode.
I also remember the Discord messages.
Oh man, yeah, I was in fine form during that.
All right, Gus. Gus, have you returned?
I've returned.
You have returned. You have unleft.
Are we talking about throwing books?
We're talking about, are there books that you have found so angering that you've thrown them across the room?
Probably, unfortunately, Book of the Hopi. I was expecting so much more, and it was so much less than I expected.
All right, so this was just a disappointment in what the book actually was, not anger at something the book was saying.
It was, a pretty anachronistic view of like the Hopi people, and I was expecting more like substance as far as like the belief system, but it wasn't that. So,
well, JJ, I really find the whole Omega Point idea really fascinating. I just used 2 reallys there, so really fascinating. And I also find Tipler entertaining, but I'm known
you do.
A fair number of people who really get angry with the whole Tipler idea. So what is it about Tipler that angers you so much?
It is, so his conjecture was, if you have a computer that can have the operational parameters of a human brain, And he gave some pretty wild estimations in that book.
Well, you're not kidding, and I'll agree with you on that. I mean, I remember looking at some of those calculations, thinking, "Where the hell is he coming up with this?"
Yeah, then it should just spontaneously develop consciousness. And he goes out of his way to attempt to prove this scientifically, which none of it makes sense. Absolutely none of it. And I was just like, no, screw you. I'm out. And that's when I threw the book.
One of the things that people get mad about is they think that everything he's talking about is an allegorical discussion of Christ.
I did not come across that particular.
That one didn't come in your mind.
No, I was purely thinking about this I took it at face value.
Well, I mean, the one thing I will say about the Omega Point is there's keeping it clean, a lot of yank it out of your kazoonie math.
Oh my gosh, yes.
In there, there's a lot of you know what I mean by that. Just
yep.
Here it is. Here you go. So, Gus, are you a person who's spent much time reading Carlos Castaneda?
No, I'm more of a Sir Timothy Dexter reader.
Well,
never mind.
I don't know who that. I don't know who that is. Who is Timothy Dexter? If you're gonna tell a joke, you got to at least explain it to the plebeians out here.
Never mind. All right. Okay. Well, it's a guy that he was kind of a fraud. He was kind of a philanderer. He married this woman. He was not really a knight or a sir or anything. He basically gave himself the moniker, and he was just very lucky, and he started writing books, and none of them made sense. And the punctuation was wrong, the grammar was wrong, everything was wrong about it. But it got a review somehow, and it made the New York Times bestseller list because of the bad reviews it got. And he got panned for the way he wrote this book, which it made absolutely no sense, and the sentence structure, it's just rambling thoughts. And he came out with the revision of the book after he got a lot of feedback on it, and ended up on the New York Times bestseller list. And he added one page to the book, a bunch of punctuation, all in a row. And he's and he left.
There you go. All fixed.
He was like, "Here it is. Here's all the punctuation."
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically,
and let me guess, they have college classes now breaking down the brilliance of his writings.
Timothy Dexter, the dumbest rags to riches story.
He was extremely lucky, though. He married this woman that was pretty well off.
Oh, this is cool stuff.
There's a whole his life story is just phenomenal. It's a whole rabbit hole, but it was it's not worth reading.
Yeah, but the story of Timothy Dexter is worth reading. What he wrote is not worth reading.
I tried.
What, have you ever tried to read Charles Fort?
Oh, no.
Hard to read Charles Fort. But, well, look, I believe that it's time to call upon our resident Hebrew Bible scholar, which is JJ, and ask him to talk about Ezekiel's wheel. Unless anybody has an objection.
No. Can we frame this as an alien conversation, by the way? Because
it is absolutely not going to be an alien conversation. 0% chance.
All right.
Gus, we've got you covered. Whenever he stops talking, we'll throw in alien stuff.
Okay. All right.
But before we get to that, though, I do have one thing to say about another one of the topics that came up, which was the nature of evil.
That's not a 1 minute topic, JJ.
It's not, but I have.
That's a 2-day topic.
I got one thing to say.
Okay.
And then you can hash it out, or we can skip past it and put a book dog ear in whatever you want to do. I may be the only one, but a lot of people just take for granted this very common statement that without good, there can be no evil, or without evil, there can be no good. Okay. And that,
I would call that an unsupported dichotomy.
Oh, it is. It is the most extreme dialectic that you could possibly get. Mm-hmm. I with every fiber of my being, I reject that. Can I tell you why? Not
I figure
right
it probably
now.
has something to do with Pee Wee Herman or something like that, but
no, I don't. So I have been pondering this for decades at this point. I still can't give you definitive, this is my thought process around it yet. But in my heart of hearts, the very first time I ever heard this conversation, I was like, no. And in fact, when I watched that absolutely horrendous Gervais movie about, everyone always tells the truth, but yet he was the only individual who suddenly gained the ability to lie, I stopped at 10 minutes in. I'm like, no, this is absolute dog rubbish.
Wait. The whole world exists in such that they can't lie. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. And then somebody gains the ability to lie.
Right.
Okay. That's an interesting philosophical
The
question.
premise was interesting. The way that the movie was done and just him in general absolutely was not.
Okay.
But it's kind of that same theory brought out to much more understandable concepts, I would say.
Well, fictionally, I mean, I'm my mind immediately goes to all right, let's posit a universe that is utter evil everywhere, all the time, under all circumstances. And what would that universe be like? Notice that I've asked a question that makes everybody silent.
Well,
I don't have an answer to that. And then the question in my mind comes: if the universe is utterly evil all the time, everywhere, under all circumstances, how do you know? What do you compare it to?
Yeah, that's the issue.
I was just curious about the Ezekiel wheel, how that ties in. Like, I didn't kind of get the correspondence.
This is just Paranormal Rundown world. This
is a pre-topic rabbit hole.
Okay. All right.
It's happened sometimes.
Okay.
So I think that's part of the intent of the statement. Without evil, there can't be good. Without good, there can't be evil. Because if there's only one thing,
right?
If it's all good or if it's all evil, there's no contrast to notice the difference.
You can't really measure it.
Who created good and evil?
That's a pretty big question.
I mean, it's a thought. Like, if you're a theist, you have to. If God created everything, then why would He create evil at the same time? If it wasn't to serve a purpose, or like part of nature, or part of the construct.
Yeah, I think there's a question, right? Did God allow evil, or did God create evil? Because those are two different ways of looking at it.
But if you create free will to have evil in the first place, then essentially you're creating evil, right? By definition,
create
by allowing
free will to
happen.
allow choices to be made. That does not mean that you intend evil to be made with those choices.
Well,
And
it's
for choices
allowing
to be made.
If you're God, I
It's
suppose
allowing it
you
to
have the
happen.
understanding that evil is possible.
Yes.
Right. But why allow it to exist at all if it wasn't part of some plan or some scheme?
Well, I think it probably is part of the plan. I think it does serve a purpose. And you could say, in the same way, Christian standpoint, you say the third of the angels fell. Why did God allow that to happen? Why didn't he just eliminate that third of the angels right then? Right?
Maybe they crash landed.
2/3 were good. The rest were evil. All right. I get rid of the evil. Done.
Well,
now
look,
we
I
just
mean,
got all good.
There's something. Is there a difference between evil and I guess what I would have to call the evil impulse? Okay, I'm thinking back to, somebody's probably going to give me dirty looks in a minute, but the Star Trek episode where Captain Kirk gets split in the transporter, and you've got the Captain Kirk who's the milquetoast Captain Kirk, and he's fully good. There's nothing evil about him. He's as good as he can possibly be. And then you've got the fully evil Captain Kirk, and he's kind of hiding in the corner. He's got that great look on his face. Well, the evil Captain Kirk is actually more effective than the fully good Captain Kirk. And so I believe that it simply just might be that evil impulse is necessary for conscious sapient beings to be effective in God's creation.
Are you guys familiar with the like Alan Watts and his concept of like the God button?
You mean the God spot in the brain?
No, the God button. It's a metaphor. All right.
I don't know what the God button is. Gus is going to tell us about the God button.
So if you want to know maybe some of the logic behind this, like I guess you have to kind of submit yourself to like a position where you think it out logically. Like why would this happen, right? So the idea here is pretend for a second that you're omnipotent. We'll not call ourselves God at this point. Like we'll just say we are omnipotent beings in this imaginary world, and we can do anything we want, anything we can think.
Kind of like
Q, right?
Okay.
And so all you have to do is think of it and hit a button. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you hit the button and you start doing all kinds of cool stuff. You do everything you've ever imagined. You do the best things in the world, and you keep hitting the button. And what happens eventually?
You get bored.
You get bored. And maybe if you're God and you're omnipotent and you are in this position of power where you generate and create everything in the universe, maybe there's no other gods. Maybe there's one, right? Maybe what you want is to create things that you can commune with, right?
Correct.
And maybe you want to create beings that maybe as you create them, they're part of you, right? And maybe it's an experience that you have through them in this universe that you create.
Correct.
At the same time,
you're creating, well, minuscule elements of yourself that can experience things,
right?
And then vicariously through all these things, you as God are also able to experience these things,
right? And
I do know this concept, yeah.
Well, let's say you go through the mental exercise and you create this planet, you create all these people, and you have all these shared experiences through different people's eyes. And one day you realize that as you're experiencing these lives, you realize that everything is orchestrated by you. There's no chance involved, right? And there's no free will. There's no choice involved in the matter. Like these beings don't have a choice unless you give them a choice.
Correct.
Right? So you give them free will and you let them choose to
do as they wish.
Right. To do as they wish.
And to experience the consequences of doing as they wish.
Right. So when you go through the whole mental exercise, you're probably going to have instances of people that do terrible things, which might be evil, right? You might create angels that are evil as antagonists in the story. You might create all kinds of things that we can't even fathom, right?
Well, I'm sure that there are evils beyond which humans can easily imagine.
but even to the most even to the most like hardened criminal, like they know when they've done something wrong, right? And there's like this innate sense of well, for most people anyway.
And not all of them care, but yes,
Right.
they do know that they've done something wrong.
Right. And I don't know like what the definition of evil actually is, but and I think in my mind it's somebody that chooses to do selfish things probably, and to care about yourself more than other people. And maybe like the whole purpose here is to because the creator wanted to create living beings, you know? And we want we experience good and we experience evil when we start to destroy ourselves, right? And that keeps us on the rails as the human race advances. As we experience evil, it reminds us, hey, don't go too far in that direction, or there's repercussions.
Well, the human race advances in terms of technology. The human race advances in terms maybe of philosophy. I'm not even sure about that. I mean, I see no evidence that a 21st century man is any more innately intelligent or wise than a third century man.
I mean, I think the collective experience is different, definitely. But yeah, I think there's definitely a progression. I mean, if you look at just the ability to write things down and preserve them for the next generation, like that in itself is progression, right?
Yes, that is.
Well, when you talk about evil, the way you're describing it, Gus, you sound like you're just describing behavior. Good behavior,
maybe intent.
Bad behavior.
I think more intent.
Okay, but
intent and
it's intent that's driving that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you from my experiences and having run up against the demonic, there is something that feels evil that is much worse than any human acting poorly. Right.
Do you know?
But this is absolutely correct.
But when you say the word "feel," that is you engaging in the thought, right? And I think us as humans, when we have those thoughts, we experience fear from that, right?
This is experiencing a being that was evil in my presence, and there was a feeling that came off of this being. Was not, I would not describe it as I think that's evil. You could feel hatred and darkness and what I would call evil. Something that, I would have to, my wife is a huge fan of true crime and serial killer, documentaries and stuff like that. You really almost have to see the absolute worst unrepentant serial killers to even get close to feeling anything that's like this. But the only way I can describe it is as a feeling, because it's what I felt at that moment. Not sitting here thinking back about it. I don't sit here and go, oh, that was evil. It's what I felt at the time that made it feel
like it had
evil.
bad intentions, right? Like that's
no. I felt it like there were waves of a force coming off of it, as if I was just like you would if you were standing in front of a potbelly stove and you feel the heat come off of the stove. I felt evil coming off of this being. This was not a thought exercise.
Yeah, I would say that this is where there is a definite difference between mortal evil, which is usually rooted in selfishness, short-sightedness, something, etc., or preternatural evil, right, which is a willingness to destruction in full knowledge of what it's doing, and to do so on a universal scale. It is something that so far eclipses mortal evil that the two only share a name.
Isn't that kind of like, I mean, humans are definitely capable of tremendous evil, in my opinion, anyway.
They are. Believe me.
I think it's, experiences like this might serve a purpose. It might serve a purpose to remind us that we shouldn't be.
I think they do
in the future. Yeah, we shouldn't.
I think they do
that.
serve a purpose. That experience sent me down a path that brought me where I am right now, this second. I would not be here doing this if I had not had that experience. I would not have the faith that I have now. So yeah, it served a purpose. But I'm saying that, and JJ split it up perfectly, right? There's human acts that can be evil, and then there's preternatural evil that is something completely different. And the question is which are we talking about, right? God allow people to do evil things that are human type evil? Yes.
I mean, in my mind, I don't segment. Like, and maybe it's just because I haven't had the same experiences as you. But in my mind, like, I think we are capable of tremendous good and evil, and we choose every day. And I think maybe if you're talking about like some kind of like being or demon or something like that, I mean, if you look at the biblical explanation of demons, they had free will at one point in time, right? And they've probably gone through a similar evolution as humans have, and
yeah, well, that's absolutely right. They do have free will.
What if it's us in the future? Think about that.
Boy, I certainly hope not.
Well, I mean, that could be our future. Like if we succumb to our selfishness and fear, So go ahead.
Yeah, there was certainly nothing human about this thing.
Yeah,
and I think I mean, Vic, you've seen it.
I've experienced a few of these things. I came up with the term insect nihility, meaning that using the term insect to mean that what I was dealing with wasn't human at all, and the nihility part simply meaning devoid of anything human, devoid of anything positive or good. And I think it's a pretty decent term, actually.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been kind of the same thing in the y'all know my story, my personal story.
Yes.
The person that was the leader of that whole crew.
Yeah.
Same thing with him.
It's a very disorienting feeling. It's a very disorienting thing to be around.
And Gus, I think you're right. I think it's something that it's really hard to wrap your head around if you haven't experienced it.
Sure.
That said, I don't wish that experience on you.
No, well, I don't either.
I mean, to be, I mean, I've had weird experiences myself, but I guess to put it into perspective here, in like the way I think about it is the way that the power that things like that have are the amount of thought that you give to them, and just generally speaking, people like shouldn't think about that kind of stuff. Maybe it's not for us.
Yeah, I don't think that what I ran into, the things that Josh has seen or Vic, I don't think we had any power over what these things are or are not. I think God does, but yeah, there's no.
There might have been the ability to fervently pray and have some protection through that prayer.
Yes.
Maybe.
No, agreed. That's part of what helped me.
Maybe. I can't even guarantee that.
It's sort of like being in a cage with a lion and thinking, okay, if I think that this lion is a cuddly little teddy bear, then it won't have claws and sharp teeth and eat me. And that's just not the way life works. You can't think differently about these things. When you run into something like this, it is what it is. And, pray, you can call out, you can whatever, but you're not going to change what it is. You're not giving it power just by seeing it. Now, you may be feeding it off of fear, but, that's not making it what it is.
But if it's so powerful and like you can't really do anything, you're basically at its mercy, then why care, right? And why be fearful of it? And at the same point in time, like, what can we control as humans? We can control what we do, right?
To a certain degree, yes, we can.
Yeah. And like, I kind of feel like, okay, so if you want to like look at the word karma, right? I mean, doing something with the intention of or just out of fear or out of hate or out of jealousy or something like that, you're going to get what you put out. If you do things out of love and out of a sense of like, trying to contribute towards life and building life, those are things that are like more powerful than things like that. And I mean, if you believe that there is a creator of the universe, like, you have to believe that he's powerful or more powerful than his creation, or what, at some point we have to take personal responsibility. Like, the only thing we can control is what we do. We can't control what, like, some being or something that we can't even fathom what it is. I think like where we give power to things like that, or when we react.
I'm going to come up with one quick little concept here. I don't want it to go into a rabbit hole. The concept I always have trouble dealing with God is omniscience. Not really omnipotence, but omniscience. And that is because as a human, I can't perceive what it's like to live in such a way that there can be no novelty, that there can be no surprises. Okay, if I'm omniscient, that means I not only know everything that's happening right now, I know everything that's ever has happened, and I know everything that ever will happen. And that is to me, that's a nightmare.
I mean, that's it. That makes the assumption of time.
Yeah, like, yes, it does make the assumption of time. But that
would make a creator like subject to time in that construct, right?
Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I mean, you would assume, as Tipper does, that we're talking a creator that can exist in all times and in all spaces. So I've always had
that would mean omniscience at the same time, right?
Yes, but I've always had this question in my mind of, could a creator God shield part of himself, I'm going to use himself just because it's convenient, from that knowledge? And that's
I would assume that's possible, right? I would assume that's possible, right?
I would assume that's possible. And that's one of the reasons that I find myself, so for instance, why I've never found there to be any issue with the idea of evolution. Because evolution is a system that will bring about novelty over time. And would an omnipotent, omniscient God be able to say, I'm creating this zone of activity, this zone of possibility, where I'm not exerting any control, and I'm shielding myself from the knowledge of what might happen? And then you get a planet with the sort of a variety of life as Earth.
So you're thinking like hiding the random number generator.
Hiding the random number generator, which is as good a statement as any. But
so, Gus, you said you've had some experiences. What
yep,
experiences
that's what I want to know too.
In my youth, I was out there, and I've seen like some odd things, I guess you could say. There's been experiences where I felt like I've been in contact with like being like you described, like, and it was very frightening. Like, and like I remember back on it, and like I kind of can relate to the thoughts that you might have had at the same time, but like I also kind of felt like at the same time there there was like a benevolence involved in like this scenario where like I wasn't afraid for my own personal safety. Like it was more or less like I'm experiencing this creature that is like, you know, more powerful than me, and like there's nothing I could do, like if this thing wanted to just destroy me, you know what I mean? And at the same time, like I didn't feel like it mattered, I guess.
If you were destroyed?
I on some level, it's just if you can't do anything, what does it matter anyway, right? So like if you're falling and like you're about to hit like the ground, like what do you like, okay, change position if you want, but like you're still gonna hit the ground, right?
Yes.
So it's sort of like why be afraid of it? Why not not try to understand it, but try to be maybe try to understand it and try to maybe figure out why this is happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, what you're talking is a fatalistic position of there's nothing I can do to change this. Let me experience it the best I can and learn from it what I can.
And to some extent, and in my scenario, I was probably in need of correcting my life at the time. And I think maybe that experience helped me to do that, and maybe that served a purpose for that. But I think it does change you when you see things like that. And like I don't go around like fearful of those things. Like, and maybe they exist, maybe they don't. Maybe they're in our minds. Maybe it's something that is ingrained in us to experience, like to make sure that we live the right way, and to make sure that we don't make the bad choices.
Yeah, and for the record, if you're falling, the only thing you need to do is to forget to hit the ground.
Right.
That is how you learn to fly.
Yes, that's how you learn to fly.
But I get what you're saying, and I don't want to come off as like, oh, I'm fearful of this thing. And the experiences were scary in the moment.
Right.
But no, it's not something that I'm afraid of, vigilant over. But no, I don't walk around in fear because of it. But when I'm describing evil, I'm just describing the way it felt at the time. It was much more than just a bad acting human. But,
right.
Yeah, I do think these experiences are allowed in our life as a way to teach us something.
Yeah, I want to say
to enact some change.
And correct me if I'm wrong for those that have read the book, but I want to say it was in Hostage to the Devil. I want to say Malachi Martin said, "You'll know true evil when you're in the room with it because you'll feel nothing but that pure hatred, that want for you to die."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't care who you are. If you don't fear that, then something is horribly, horribly wrong.
I do. JJ, can you give us a good starting point for Ezekiel's wheel that we can do in less than half an hour?
Not if we're going to contaminate the talk with that of aliens.
I have no interest. I have no thoughts about aliens other than I was first introduced to that idea by my 6th grade teacher, Mr. Basham. And he read the art, he read Ezekiel and he said, "That's a spaceship." That was,
oh dear Lord.
But okay. The rule is we are talking about Ezekiel from a biblical perspective, not including the idea of aliens.
Correct. So, in the Hebrew Bible, there are 3 classifications Well, there are two classifications of angels. There are the cherubim, which make up the living throne, that, at least within historical perspectives, had 4 hooves and a human-like face. That's directly inherited from Akkadian mythology.
What do you mean by the term living throne?
It is a throne made up of cherubim.
Okay.
They
the throne of God?
Yes, the throne of God.
Okay.
And in Ezekiel, that is...
Is it like a literal chair? Is that it? What is, like, when it's translated from the Hebrew, like what's the original context of it? Is it like a chair?
It's living throne. And
Okay.
if you look at Ezekiel, then it is defined by, he redefines the cherubim as having 4 hands, 1 central hoof, 4 faces. And if you line this up, then they form a box with 4 of their hands intersecting, and then the other 4 pointing outwards at each one of the directions. And then the hoof, the 1 central leg, becomes a spoke. So it essentially becomes a living chariot to Ezekiel.
Okay.
There are the seraphim, which, at least according to Phoenician reliefs, are depicted as fire snakes. And that is borne out through the other uses of the word seraph in the Hebrew Bible. I actually did an entire episode on Southern demonology about the concept of angels. There is a potential 3rd category that some pseudepigraphal books go into details into, and that would be the Ophanim. And those are the wheels. And these are the living wheels that appear beneath the central foot of the cherubim. And as a result, it does form a perfect chariot in which the Spirit of God then rides around in the midst of. I personally don't think that you can classify the Ophanim as a separate angelic category, but I am not going to make the argument here for or against. But I will say that other extra biblical resources have pointed out that whenever it went over the classifications of angels, then it included the Ophanim in that list of potential angels. Now, there are other types of angels that are listed in the Hebrew Bible. There's the angel of God. There is the lying spirit of God. There's a few different types, but if you're talking about the general categories, those are the 3 that have been pointed out.
JJ, can I interrupt just for a second to ask a question?
Absolutely.
The way you're describing these things, it's a very structural, mechanical kind of description.
Oh, it is. And that was one of the revolutions that Ezekiel as a book brought to the Hebrew Bible and the prophets.
What do you think the purpose of the story was?
It is to shock and to awe, to try to jolt Israel out of its sinful behavior, to demonstrate the absolute majesty of God and how that should lend credence to Ezekiel's words. That's what I would say that, all of that is about.
Do you believe in, like, the literal sense of the story, or do you think it's like a metaphor for something? Or
I mean, it seems with the sort of structurality, is that a word? The structural nature of everything you're talking about, hard to make a metaphor there. I mean, I mean, it really sounds like the creation of a transportation system.
Yeah, Ezekiel takes that to the next level. And honestly, if there's one part of the holy writings that I could say is more likely to be an actual vision from God rather than just a metaphor or an allegory, this really does stand out in my brain as something that is a radical reinterpretation and leap forward an evolution of thought around the structure of heaven, the throne of God, and you really don't find its like until you come to Revelation, where, or as Father Birdsong would say, revelations. If I'm joking. In which the throne, the seraphim, and the cherubim are actually all merged into one set of beings. And I will throw one last thing in there. This entire depiction of the quote-unquote realistic angels that you see spread all the way across social media, it's BS. There is no basis of reality for any of that crap. It has picked and chosen from so many different sources to try to come up with the most grotesque images that it's patently ridiculous. Are angels?
You're talking about the images of the wheel itself?
Oh no, yeah, they conflate everything together.
Okay.
So it's BS. It's total BS, and I call that out even in my own episode. But are angels awesome? Absolutely. Will they fill you with dread? Yes. I said before that meeting God is going to lead to a very bad day.
Very, very rough day.
I would say the same thing for meeting an angel.
What do you think of the book? Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead, Gus.
What do you think of the Book of Enoch?
I am an expert on the Book of Enoch. I have done a lot of translation, of study. I've done quite a few different episodes on it. It is an extra canonical book for a very, very, very good reason.
What was the reason? Yeah.
Well, to me, it is the central problem is the Nephilim. Enoch's divided into 4 different sections. And the most interesting section, by and far, is the first, where it is attempting to provide an explanation for Genesis 6, because that is the most troubling theologically in a lot of different respects. And it is not the only extra canonical book that attempts to explain Genesis 6. Jubilees all falls into the exact same category. And ironically enough, both of those books were considered canonical in Second Temple Judaism. But the main issue with Enoch in particular is the fact that after the Watchers bound themselves in a curse to sleep with the daughters of man after seeing that they were comely, that union produced a race of bloodthirsty giants that then sinned by devouring and screwing anything, and sometimes at the exact same time,
everything that they
can get their hands on.
Anything. Fish. Amoebas.
Until the earth gave great cry unto the heavens, and then God sent 4 of his archangels to then deal with the problem. And then Gabriel sent the Nephilim against each other in battle until they were slain. The problem is that even after they were slain, they were never dispatched, because they were an unholy union between mortal or flesh and spirit, as it says. And so therefore their remaining spirit was unleashed into the atmosphere, and that's where they stay theoretically, and they have nothing but hatred in their being. And so even God, who sent forth the deluge to wipe away all of the horribleness that happened because of the Watchers, it did nothing, because the Nephilim are still in existence.
So with the Book of Enoch, there's a whole narrative where Enoch describes basically going to heaven, right? And he's describing a journey where he goes and actually goes to the throne of God, right?
Yes, that's still in the first section.
Are there like parallels between the Ezekiel version and the Book of Enoch?
No, absolutely not.
So the descriptions are completely different.
Absolutely different. Because Enoch doesn't describe heaven. He describes the living throne of God. And that's about as far as he goes. Whereas Enoch actually depicts an entire vision of heaven, and then the area in which the Watchers were to be chained for 7 times 7 generations and all the rest of it. So, I mean, and the other thing too is that you have to remember that the Pseudepigrapha, which is the collection of works that existed between the Hebrew Bible and the Christian New Testament, is it literally, when translated from Latin, means false epitaph. The writer claimed to be Enoch in order to lend greater weight to the words as they were written. And it is not uncommon to have that. There's an entire classification of books that fall into that same exact category. And in fact, exactly. And in fact, the only Christian religion that still believes those to be holy is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, who, without them, we would not have preserved the vast majority of those in gas. And it wasn't until we found the Dead Sea Scrolls did we actually find Hebrew copies of First Enoch and Jubilees.
So what do you think the difference between the living throne of God is and the description that Ezekiel gave?
Because before Ezekiel, there really was no idea that the throne of God was a chariot. He completely reimagined what the cherubim looked like. He took their ancient origins and radically transformed them, which is, as I was saying before, almost a complete evolution of thought on the matter.
It's interesting. I might be.
Can I ask some silly questions? I mean, some 6-year-old questions?
You can ask whatever you want, my friend.
All right, so we're talking about seraphim forming the living throne of God.
Up cherubim.
What's that now?
Cherubim form the living throne of God.
Okay, cherubim, excuse me. It doesn't really matter which, but do we ever get any kind of understanding as to the population of the seraphim and the cherubim?
Not in the Hebrew Bible.
How many of these critters are there?
No, there's no definitive answers to any of this. In fact, the angelology that you find contained in the Hebrew Bible is woefully inadequate to answer such questions. Now, when you turn to other sources of Jewish thought, whether that be the Midrash or the Talmud, or even much later Kabbalah, then you can find some of like more theoretical or theophostic, whatever that word is, musings around that particular topic.
Theosophical?
Yes, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I am tongue-tied tonight. Or you can find also the same kind of questions being posed in the early Christian church of, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin.
Sure.
So,
And these are, I assume, utterly meaningless questions. It's just when something starts describing an unseen reality as very much like you would describe the assembly of an engine, the numbers start popping in my mind.
and I can see that. Mm-hmm. But the number, like, for example, it always talks about 4 cherubim, typically, at least within Ezekiel. There's an unspecified number when it comes to other depictions of them. The ark has 2 cherubim that's supposed to decorate its the cover of it, etc. So, but yeah, there's no answers to that.
It does seem that there is at least a finite and relatively small number of archangels.
4 or 7.
Yeah, 4 or 7. Yeah, I mean, we're not talking thousands. We're talking, let's just say 7.
Of which the other 3 are in high fluctuation.
Meaning?
You have Michael, Mikael, who is like God. Gabriel, mighty warrior of God. Raphael, the healing power of God. And Uriel, the light of God.
And the other 3 are?
They are given different names and different works.
Different works, right.
Yeah, but the Hebrew Bible does not attempt, like, for example, there were, at least according to Second Temple Judaism, there was an angel that led each one of the 70 nations. And that was, supposedly before people began drawing the connections between Zoroastrian being the potential source for the dualism that erupted within Second Temple Judaism, that could have been a reason. While all of these other nations are trying to kick Israel's butt, if they're led by an angel, then why are all of these other nations coming after one of the lead angels, which is over the nation of Israel, which is Israel?
So if there's 7 potential archangels mentioned, is there something that limits it to 7?
Nothing to my knowledge that has been categorically written. Now, when you come to the Christian New Testament, then you actually get, different orders of angels, and it goes into a little bit more detail. And then there were extra canonical books to that, such as like the Pseudo-Dionysius, which tries to go into much more detail, but it's also a heretical book.
Yeah. And you can also look into the other angels in the Summa Theologica from Thomas Aquinas. Talks about the 9 choirs.
Where do you believe Thomas Aquinas gained that knowledge?
Divine revelation.
Divine revelation. It's, I guess about the best I can do. So, well, gentlemen, I'm becoming a bit fatigued.
I am too.
I'm glad I can almost talk like myself again.
I'm glad you're not throwing up.
Public service announcement: avoid COVID if you can. I'm really sorry that Father Birdsong could not be here tonight. Josh, you've done a great job covering for your dad.
Absolutely. Give him our best.
Gus, you have been Just an absolute natural at the Paranormal Rundown. It's just like you went to Paranormal Rundown school. And got outstanding marks. Who else has anything to say prior to us ending this?
Nothing for me other than it was great having you here, Gus.
Yep. Yeah, good meeting you guys. Interesting talk, and appreciate the other perspectives on things. So.
Just you moved right into paranormal dork talk. So, all right, well, I'm going to end this, and it'll be several weeks before this comes out, Gus, but I'll let you know when it does. And of course, you're welcome to contact us anytime.
All right.
Talk to you guys later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, one and all. This is Cedric Dankworth Smythe. I received a letter the other day saying that I sounded somewhat arrogant when I stated my name. Well, I don't really know how else to do so. I guess I could say, howdy everybody, this here's Cedric. Well, that's not really my character. Well, we haven't had a good round of dungeon talk in a while, so here we go. Let's have some dungeon talk talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
One thing we've never talked about is that incredible depth of thought that went into bringing about all these Dungeons and Dragons monsters.
Oh, I'm telling you, Gary Gygax was amazing.
Aren't there hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these monsters, and I suppose they exist in some kind of relationship to each other, and
they do. They're defined by the worlds in which they belong to. There are very distinct settings. You have Ravenloft, which is my favorite. That is a dimension of dread. You have the basic.
I understand that.
The basic setting, which is Forgotten Realms. You have Greyhawk, which was what D&D was originally set in. That was a pure creation of Gygax, which then was unfavored in going forward because then they would owe him royalties. That's why Faerun was created. Dark Sun, Spelljammer, the list keeps going on. And over the various different iterations of D&D, then you've had new and improved monster manuals created. Yeah, it's amazing. In fact, there's a YouTube channel called Dungeon Dad who will pick a random creature of the week and kind of highlight it. But there's a ton of D&D podcasters out there that will go through, and they're either do lore dumps of a race or a subset of creatures, or make up brand new ones for people to take advantage of.
What were the little figurines made of? Were they made of lead, or were they made of like something else?
They can be made of a variety. Pewter. The older ones were made of lead, I believe. Plastic. There's a lot of 3D printing going on now.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's probably an easy way to make your character. But I just remember seeing there was a Dungeons and Dragons store near my house a long time ago, and I used to see all the figurines in the window and be like, "Are they all lead?"
Not anymore. They're not.
Yeah.
Now you can go on, I think it's Hero Forge, and make your character, then 3D print it from there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my gosh, they're huge in that space. You can fully customize characters and get them shipped straight to you. It's a nice service from what I've heard.
It amazes me the interest in D&D to this day, from podcasts and YouTube channels that are gameplay to online. What is it? Roll20? What is it, JJ? That you can play
virtual tabletop systems. Yeah, Roll20 is kind of the biggest one, but there's quite a few others that are in competition. Wizards is currently making their own right now. That's been in development for a while. But can we take just a quick detour to say how many missteps can Hasbro, who owns Wizards of the Coast, who bought the original TSR, has made in the last year?
Oh, it's an insane amount.
Oh my gosh. It started off with them trying to revoke the open gaming license from creators. And this is essentially what allows the base concepts of D&D to be used by independents and third-party companies. It's a huge deal. In fact, this prompted, I think, the biggest rival, which uses a lot of these fundamental concepts, to then the Kobold Press to then turn around and say, "All right, fine, we're going to make our own called, codename Black Flag." And we're just going to go from there, because they're the ones who make Pathfinder, who is the biggest alternative to what traditional modern D&D happens to be. But then, so Wizards finally kind of calmed the waters after a lot of missteps and said, "Fine, we won't do that. We apologize. It was a bad move," which everyone agreed that yes, it was. But then, right before the holidays, Wizard decided to go ahead and lay off 1,100 people in order to, and then the C-suite gave themselves a multi-million-dollar bonus. We're like, wow. And this is a big deal because Wizards has been working with Larian Studios for years to create Baldur's Gate 3, which is the biggest thing that has promoted D&D in years. The game is phenomenal. It won Game of the Year. And all of the people at Wizard that interfaced with Larian Studios is gone. The company has no more contacts with that, internal contacts with Wizards of the Coast. It is the most backwards thing, a short-sighted move I have seen in a long time. So, yeah, even though there's a rabid fan base out there for D&D, especially given the release of the movie last year, Honor Amongst Thieves, they have made misstep after misstep to actively discourage the community. And there is a gigantic wave of backlash against them now. And it's well deserved.
And there was another thing, too. It was affecting all the content creators. They were trying to change the licensing where you couldn't stream it or even podcast it.
Oh, yeah. In fact, one of the people that I used to listen to, AJ Pickett, who's been making lore dump videos for years, he switched away and started thinking about making his own open gaming license. A lot of people are doing this, but if they took away the open gaming license, then they could monetize anything that came out of it. And there's a huge independent press around D&D modules and concepts, and that would have put the kibosh on that.
I wonder if they're expecting. Well, I just wonder if they're expecting a significant shrink in gaming revenue for the year, because Microsoft just laid off 1,900 Activision, Blizzard, and Xbox employees.
Oh, I know. And the fact that merger even went through was the biggest bloody mistake that could have been made in the gaming world. But yeah, I mean, tech just in general is having a another horrible year of layoffs. But
AI's not going to make it any easier.
But the reason why Hasbro did this move is because even though they were profitable, extremely profitable, their profits did not compete with Mattel's. That was the driving reason. And of course, Mattel had a banner year because of the Barbie movie. So, yeah.
These companies are run by analysts, though. They're people that They think Coke and Pepsi, and that's it. Yeah.
It's another horrible example
of the famous McGilliwiger and Slobmeyer consulting firm, known internationally for making horrible business decisions. You see, JJ started to name some large consulting firm that has more lawyers than we have chocolate chip cookies. We don't want to anger them. But I think you can use your imagination. There are, of course, hundreds of McGilliwiger and Slobmeyer type corporations across the world. And boy, did they ever make all of our lives so much better.
Well, hello everybody out there. This is Alternate Universe, Joe Cool, Vic Hermanson. I'm the coolest, most laid-back guy in this universe, or any other universe for that matter. Well, that's episode 15. Count 'em, 15 of the Paranormal Rundown in the bag, as they say. Well, this was an excellent rundown. That Gus, man, he knows his stuff. You know, we got a new employee here at the Rundown. That's Spanky the Demon. He's been trying real hard to get a job for a long time. We finally decided he deserved a job, so next week, or next Rundown, sorry I was speeding things along there, you'll get to hear Spanky the Demon. The Paranormal Rundown is a joint production of Vic Hermanson, J.J. Johnson, Dave Griffith, and Father Michael Birdsong. Our guests are an integral part of the show, and if you'd like to be a guest on the Paranormal Rundown, just contact us at feedback@paranormalrundown.com. That groovy music you heard was from Lobo Loco and Smart Sound. Any media clips we decided to use, they're under the protection of the Fair Use Doctrine. Please, if you get a chance, be extra special kind, I mean just truly excellent, and give us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. Until episode 16, this is Joe Cool, Vic Hermanson, signing off for the Paranormal Rundown.